I kept my sister's affair with my husband's secret because our dying father deserved peace. She thought that silence meant I would eventually forgive her. Then Dad died. At the estate meeting, the lawyer said, "Your father changed one thing." My sister stopped smiling when she heard who would make the decisions. For months before Dad died, I thought watching him get weaker was the hardest thing I would have to survive that year. I was wrong. By then, most of my life revolved around him. Then his health declined, and suddenly he needed other people. He hated that. I started helping with the duplex almost by accident. Dad would call because one tenant needed a repair. I would arrange it. An insurance notice came in. I handled it. A contractor sent an estimate. Dad and I went through it together. There was never some formal conversation where he handed me responsibility. I just became the person doing more of it because he couldn't. Tara helped with Dad too. She had 2 kids and plenty going on in her own life, so I tried not to judge how often she showed up. Some weeks she came several times. Other weeks, barely at all. I told myself this wasn't the kind of situation where sisters should keep score. At home, Gavin and I were struggling. We had been married 8 years. We weren't separated. We weren't discussing divorce. We still shared a home, a bedroom, bills, plans. But I was exhausted, and I know I wasn't giving the marriage the attention I had before Dad got sick. Sometimes I would come home late, eat whatever was available, and realize Gavin had been talking for several minutes while I was thinking about Dad's next appointment. Gavin noticed. At first, he seemed understanding. One night, I got home much later than I expected because Dad had a rough day. I apologized for missing dinner. Gavin kissed my forehead and said, "Ruby, stop apologizing. Take care of your dad. I can handle things here." I remember feeling lucky to have him. That sentence sounds different to me now. Tara was around our house more during those months too. Sometimes she came by after visiting Dad. Sometimes she brought food. Sometimes she sat across from me at the kitchen table while I complained about paperwork or doctors or how guilty I felt every time somebody needed something from me. She knew Gavin and I were having problems. Not catastrophic problems. Marriage problems. Distance. Stress. Arguments about time. She knew I was scared about Dad. She knew I felt like I was failing everybody at once. Once, I told her exactly that. I feel like everyone needs something from me, and whatever I do, somebody gets less. Tara reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You're doing more than anyone could expect." I believed her. That memory bothers me more than I want it to, because I still don't know whether she had already slept with my husband when she said it. I found out on a Thursday night. Nothing dramatic happened. Gavin left his phone charging on the kitchen counter while he showered. I was heating soup. His screen lit up. Tara's name appeared. I almost ignored it. Then I saw the preview. "I can't keep pretending nothing happened." I stared at those words. I didn't unlock his phone. I didn't scroll through anything. For a few seconds, my brain offered me every harmless explanation it could invent. Maybe they had argued. Maybe Tara had told Gavin something about Dad. Maybe there was some family issue they hadn't told me about yet. Then Gavin walked downstairs. He saw me beside the counter. He saw his phone. Then he saw my face. He stopped. That was when I knew. I asked, "What happened between you and Tara?" He didn't answer. I watched him search for something to say. An innocent person would have asked what I meant. Gavin looked like someone deciding which version of the truth would hurt him least. I asked again. "What happened?" He said, "Ruby, it's not. Did you sleep with my sister?" He looked down. My hand went to the edge of the counter because suddenly I felt unsteady. He said, "It was a mistake." I asked once. He hesitated. Twice. That word changed everything. Twice meant there had been a first time. Time to regret it. Time to stop. Then a second choice. I asked when. The first time had been about 6 weeks earlier. Tara had come over while I was at Dad's. They had talked. They had drinks. Then Gavin said, one thing led to another. I stared at him. Things don't lead anywhere by themselves. He looked away. "You made a choice." "I know. And then you made it again." He started crying. He told me he had been lonely. He said our marriage had become distant. He said he felt invisible. I remember that word because it made me angrier than the crying. Invisible. My father was dying, and my husband apparently decided my exhaustion made him invisible enough to sleep with my sister. I said, "We were struggling." "I know." "No. You keep talking like struggling meant we were halfway divorced. That isn't what I mean. We were married, Gavin. I know. My father is dying. I know. And your solution was Tara? He put both hands over his face. I wasn't thinking. Twice. He had nothing to say to that. Something in me went quiet. The affair hurt. But listening to him explain it like my father's illness had created the opportunity bothered me differently. He was trying to make circumstances carry some of the blame. I couldn't accept that. I told him to pack a bag. He stood up. Please don't make a permanent decision tonight. I'm not the person who made the permanent decision. Ruby. Pack. He left less than an hour later. Then I called Tara. She answered like any other night. Hey, I said, Gavin told me. Silence. No confusion. No question. Just silence. Then she whispered, oh God. I asked, how many times? Ruby, can I come over? No. How many times? She hesitated. Once. I looked at the empty chair Gavin had been sitting in. He says twice. Tara went completely quiet. That was all the confirmation I needed. I laughed once. Not because it was funny. Because even during the confession, one of them was still trying to make what happened sound smaller. She started crying. I don't know what's wrong with me. I said, neither do I. It wasn't planned. The second time wasn't planned either? Silence. I said, right? Then she tried the same explanation Gavin had used. She said we had seemed emotionally separated. I told her we weren't. She said she knew that, but things between us had seemed bad. I said, you sat in my kitchen while I told you why things were bad. I know. You knew I was taking care of Dad. I know. You hugged me. I know. You told me I was doing my best. I know. Then stop saying you know like it makes this better. She cried harder. Then she said something that changed the entire situation. Please don't tell Dad. I went silent. Until then, I had only been thinking about my marriage. About Tara. About what they had done. I hadn't thought about Dad knowing. He loved both of us. Even when he had bigger things to worry about, he kept talking about what would happen to Tara and me after he was gone. You girls take care of each other. That was one of his favorite lines. He worried that losing him would somehow pull us apart. And now I had information that could ruin the little piece he had left. I imagined sitting beside him and saying, your daughter slept with my husband. What would he do with that? He couldn't repair my marriage. He couldn't undo Tara's choice. He would only worry. So I told her I'm not telling him. I heard her exhale. Relief. That sound made me furious. Don't thank me. I wasn't going to. You were. I just don't want him hurt. Neither do I. That's why he won't know. I ended the call. The next morning, Dad had an appointment. I almost canceled because I had barely slept. Then he called and said, you're not forgetting your old man, are you? So I got dressed and went. He looked at me for maybe 3 seconds. What happened? Nothing. Ruby. I'm tired. He studied me. Dad had always known when I was lying. But he also knew when pressing me would accomplish nothing. He nodded and let it go. I kept the affair from him after that. Tara and I developed rules without ever formally discussing them. If it involved Dad, we talked. If it involved Gavin, we didn't. If we were both visiting Dad, we acted civil. Not affectionate. Not friendly. Civil. We discussed his appointments. Medication. Groceries. Repairs at the duplex. Anything safe. Dad noticed. Of course he did. One afternoon, Tara had been there with her kids. After they left, Dad looked at the door and then at me. What are you two fighting about? We're not fighting. You've both become very polite. I smiled despite myself. And that's suspicious? For you two? Absolutely. I looked away. He asked, is it money? No. Good. Then he said, don't let money do it after I'm gone. At the time, I almost laughed. Money had nothing to do with our problem. Not yet. As Dad became weaker, I handled more of the duplex. He had owned it for decades. It wasn't some glamorous investment. 2 units. Small yards. A detached garage. Plumbing that seemed personally offended by winter. Dad loved that property anyway. He knew its history down to repairs I had forgotten ever happened. When he became too tired to manage everything, I arranged contractors, tracked expenses, kept invoices, and helped with rent records. Tara hated that side of things. If something broke, her instinct was to call the first available repair company and move on. Dad wanted estimates. He wanted to understand the problem. Apparently, I had inherited that habit before I inherited anything else. Meanwhile, I started the divorce process. Gavin begged me to reconsider. We went to one counseling session. I agreed because I wanted to know whether I was making a life-changing decision purely from shock. The session gave me my answer. Gavin admitted the affair was wrong. Then he said, "I just think the context matters." That word again. Context. The counselor asked him whether my caring for Dad had made me responsible for his choices. Gavin said no immediately. But everything he had said before that suggested he still thought my absence explained enough to matter. Afterward, he asked if we could try again. I said, I don't want to spend the rest of my marriage wondering what happens the next time life gets difficult. He didn't answer. The divorce moved forward. Dad knew Gavin and I were having serious problems. He never knew why. He asked once whether we could fix things. I said I didn't think so. He looked sad. Then he let me decide. For months after I found Tara's message on Gavin's phone, Dad died. There was no perfect final speech. No moment where he gathered us together and said exactly what we needed to hear. The last normal conversation I remember was about the duplex. A section of fence needed repairing. Dad thought the estimate was ridiculous. I told him I would get another one. He said, "You always take care of things." I smiled. "You taught me." That was it. 2 days later, his condition worsened. Then he was gone. The funeral passed in a blur. People hugged me. People brought food. People told me stories about Dad I had never heard before. Tara was across the room doing the same thing. Gavin came. He stayed near the back. We never spoke. After most people had left, Tara found me outside. She looked exhausted. "We can't keep doing this." I knew exactly what she meant. Today isn't the day. We're still sisters. I looked at her. That doesn't mean what you think it means anymore. Then I walked away. A little over 2 weeks later, Tara and I sat across from Dad's estate attorney, Denise. I expected paperwork. Nothing more. Dad had talked openly about his estate for years. There was no secret fortune. He had savings. Investments. His house. The duplex. He had always said Tara and I would divide things equally. And mostly we did. After expenses and a few smaller gifts Dad had specified, the savings and investments were split evenly. His house would be sold, and the net proceeds would also be divided equally. Tara visibly relaxed. Then Denise reached the duplex. She paused. "Your father changed one thing." Tara looked at me. I looked back. Denise explained that about 6 weeks before Dad died, he had revised how the duplex would be handled. Instead of being transferred directly to us immediately, it would remain in a trust for 5 years. Tara and I were equal beneficiaries. After legitimate expenses, reserves, insurance, taxes, and maintenance, the net rental income would be divided equally. Then Denise looked at me. Dad had appointed me trustee for those 5 years. Tara's expression changed. "What does that mean?" "Ruby will manage the property and administer the trust according to your father's instructions." Tara stared at her. "So she controls it?" "She manages it." "Can she sell it?" "Any sale has to follow the trust terms." "Can I force a sale?" "Not during the 5-year period." Tara leaned back. "So if I want my half out, I can't get it?" "You still have an equal beneficial interest and receive half the net distributions. But your father specifically prevented either beneficiary from forcing an immediate sale." Tara turned toward me. "Did you know?" "No." "You were helping Dad with the duplex." "Yes." "So you talked about it." "Not this." "You expect me to believe he put you in charge 6 weeks before he died and never mentioned it?" Denise answered before I could. "Your father made the decision independently. Ruby was not present when these provisions were discussed." Tara stared at the table. Then she asked, "Why would he do that?" Denise opened a folder. "He left a letter explaining it." She gave each of us a copy. Dad's letter was short. Simple. Exactly like him. He wrote that I had already been helping manage the duplex and understood the tenants, accounts, maintenance, and repairs. He believed the property should remain a long-term asset rather than being sold immediately after his death. Then I reached the sentence that stopped me. "I know there is something between my daughters that neither of them wants to tell me." Across the table, Tara froze too. Dad knew. Not what happened. I still believe that. But he knew there was something serious between us. His letter said he didn't need to know the details. He had simply noticed enough tension to worry that grief and anger might lead one of us to make a permanent decision too quickly. He didn't want that decision to be selling the duplex. So he created 5 years of distance between his death and either daughter being able to force the issue. 5 years for the property to keep producing income. 5 years for emotions to cool. 5 years before we had to decide what came next. The final part said he loved us equally. He had not given me a larger inheritance. He had not reduced Tara's. He had trusted me to manage one asset because I was already doing it. Tara's eyes filled with tears. Then she looked directly at me. You told him. I didn't. Of course he did. No. He knew something happened. He knew we were acting differently. You were with him constantly. Yes, because he needed me. Her face tightened. You had every opportunity. And I kept my mouth shut. You expect me to believe this was all his idea? Denise said it was. Tara barely acknowledged her. You got exactly what you wanted. That was the first thing she said that made me angry enough to forget where we were. What exactly did I want? Control. My husband slept with my sister and my father died. Which part of that sounds like I got what I wanted? She flinched. Denise quietly asked if we needed a break. Tara stood. You always had to be the responsible one. I stared at her. What does that have to do with anything? You were there for every appointment, every repair, everything. Because Dad needed help. I have children. I never criticized you for having children. You didn't need to say it. No, Tara. You're angry because Dad trusted me with something you never wanted responsibility for until it became part of your inheritance. She grabbed her purse. You think you're better than me. I think we should stop talking. She laughed bitterly. Convenient. Then she left. Within a week, relatives started calling. Tara still didn't tell anyone about Gavin. Instead, she told people that I had somehow taken control of her inheritance. An aunt asked why I wouldn't just give Tara her half. I explained that Tara already had half. A cousin asked whether I could keep all the rent. No. Another relative seemed convinced Dad had left me the building and Tara nothing. Again, no. The trust was straightforward. Tara and I had equal interests. Equal eligible distributions. I couldn't take her share. I couldn't sell the duplex and keep the proceeds. I couldn't spend trust money however I wanted. I had responsibilities as trustee. I took those responsibilities seriously. Partly because Dad expected me to. Partly because I never wanted Tara to have a legitimate reason to claim I had cheated her. So I documented everything. Repairs. Insurance. Invoices. Reserves. Rent. Distributions. When something needed fixing, I kept the estimates and receipts. When a tenant moved out, I documented the condition of the unit. It was boring most of the time, which was probably good. 3 months after the estate meeting, Tara asked me to meet her at a coffee shop. She arrived with printed pages. I think we should sell. I looked through what she brought. She had done her research. The market was strong. Similar properties were selling well. Depending on the final price, costs, and taxes, she believed we could each walk away with roughly $230,000. Her numbers weren't ridiculous. I asked why now. Because the market is good. That isn't the whole reason. She looked away. Then she admitted she needed cash. Her divorce a few years earlier had left her with debt. Other expenses had accumulated. Selling would let her clear most of it and start over. For a moment, an old instinct kicked in. Tara was my younger sister. For most of our lives, if she had told me she was in trouble, I would have tried to help. Then I saw Gavin's phone in my head. I can't keep pretending nothing happened. I slid the papers back. No. Her expression hardened. That's it. I don't think we should sell. You barely looked at this. I've thought about selling before today. The market is good. The property is also producing good income. We would make more cash selling. Immediately, yes. So why wouldn't we? Because Dad specifically created the trust so we wouldn't rush into a sale. She leaned back. Dad is gone, Ruby. I looked at her. She closed her eyes briefly. That came out wrong. It did. What I mean is Dad doesn't need the income. I need the money. The trust wasn't written around whichever one of us needed cash first. She stared at me. This is because of Gavin. The duplex has nothing to do with Gavin. You're enjoying this. What? Being able to tell me no. I didn't answer fast enough. She noticed. There it is. What? You're punishing me. I'm following Dad's plan. You could agree to sell. Yes. And you won't. No. Why? I wanted to give her a perfectly clean answer. Because the duplex was profitable. Because Dad wanted us to hold it. Because there was no urgent financial reason to sell. All true. But not complete. I said, because I don't think selling is necessary. That isn't all of it. I stayed quiet. She shook her head. You finally have something I need. I looked at her. Then I said something I probably should have kept to myself. Maybe I don't feel especially motivated to make your life easier. Her face changed. There it is. You asked. You're using Dad's property to get revenge. If revenge was all I wanted, I could have told Dad. I could have told everyone at the funeral. I didn't. That doesn't make this right. I didn't say it did. She gathered her papers. Then she said the sentence she knew would hurt. Dad would hate what you're doing. I looked at her. Dad wrote the trust. You're still choosing what to do with it. Then she left. For several days, that bothered me. Not because I suddenly believed selling was clearly better. I didn't. What bothered me was knowing Tara had identified something real. My resentment was part of the decision. I called Denise and told her I wanted to make sure I wasn't letting personal feelings interfere with my obligations. She was careful. She reminded me that I couldn't misuse trust money, deny Tara legitimate distributions, or deliberately make bad financial decisions to hurt her. The trust existed for both of us. So I had the duplex independently evaluated. I looked at the income, likely maintenance costs, market conditions, future repairs, and what selling would realistically produce. The conclusion was almost annoyingly balanced. Selling made financial sense. Keeping it also made financial sense. The duplex produced stable income, and there was no urgent reason to liquidate it. That was enough for me. Whatever satisfaction I got from refusing Tara, I wasn't going to damage something Dad had built just to prove I had power over her. So we kept it. My divorce from Gavin finalized several months later. By then, I felt almost detached from him. The hardest part wasn't dividing our things. It was accepting that 8 years of marriage had ended because two people chose the worst period of my life to betray me. After the final hearing, Gavin tried to talk to me. He said, I hope someday you understand I never wanted any of this. I stared at him. That sentence told me he still didn't understand. Everything had happened to him. The affair. The divorce. The consequences. I said, you wanted enough of it twice. Then I walked away. Eventually, Gavin married someone else. Not Tara. I didn't expect that to bother me, but it did. Some part of me had assumed there must have been a huge emotional connection between them. Why else risk everything? There wasn't. Their affair never became a relationship. Tara later told me Gavin tried contacting her after I filed for divorce. She ignored him. That didn't make me feel better. It only made what they did seem even more pointless. For almost a year, Tara and I communicated mainly about the duplex. Usually by email. She received statements. She received her distributions. If something expensive needed repair, I documented it. If I needed her input, I asked. Sometimes her response was one word. Fine. Sometimes. Received. We weren't really sisters during that period. We were two people connected by a property. Then one tenant moved out. The unit had been occupied for years and needed work. The flooring was worn. The kitchen was dated. The bathroom needed repairs. I reviewed comparable rentals and proposed a moderate renovation. Tara objected. You're spending too much. I sent you the estimates. I saw them. Then what's the issue? You're using our money to improve our property. You don't know it'll increase the rent enough. That's why I sent the comparable listings. She questioned almost everything. Flooring, appliances, fixtures. For the first time in a long time, we were arguing about something normal. No Gavin. No funeral. No betrayal. Just money and cabinets. Strangely, I preferred it. The work went ahead. Nothing extravagant. We updated what made sense, fixed what needed fixing, and rented the unit again at a higher but reasonable rate. The next few months were better financially. Our distributions increased. One afternoon, Tara messaged me. The deposit was higher this month. Is that right? I sent her the statement. A few minutes later, she replied. Okay, thanks. I stared at that message longer than I should have. It was the first time she had thanked me since Dad died. Things started changing slowly after that. Tara stopped asking to sell. She stopped telling relatives I was holding her inheritance hostage. At a family gathering, someone made another comment about me controlling Dad's property. Before I could respond, Tara corrected her. She manages it. We benefit equally. I looked across the room. Tara saw me. Neither of us mentioned it. Months later, we met at the duplex because a contractor needed a decision about exterior work. After he left, Tara and I stood in the driveway. She looked up at the building. Dad loved this stupid place. I smiled. He loved complaining about this stupid place. She laughed. A real laugh. For 1 second, she sounded exactly like my sister again. That was how things became after that. Normal for a minute. Then not. A joke would remind me of how close we used to be. A certain expression would bring back the text on Gavin's phone. I stopped expecting those memories to disappear. Maybe moving forward wasn't the same as forgetting. Last month, Tara came to my house so we could go through some insurance paperwork. Afterward, neither of us immediately got up. We sat at the kitchen table. The same table where she had once held my hand and told me I was doing my best. I wondered if she remembered that too. Eventually, she asked, "Do you think Dad knew?" I knew what she meant. No, not even a little. I think he knew something serious happened. I don't think he knew what. She nodded. Sometimes I'm glad. Me too. She looked surprised. I didn't keep it from him for you, I said. I just didn't want that to be part of his final months. I know. Then she added quietly, I didn't know that then. What did you think? That you were trying to protect yourself. And later, when I saw the trust, I thought you had turned him against me. I didn't. I believe you now. That mattered more than I expected. She looked down at her hands. When Denise read Dad's letter, I thought you had won. Won what? Dad. I frowned. Tara continued. You were there more. You handled everything. Then he died and made you trustee. I thought he had decided you were the good daughter, and I was the bad one. He divided everything evenly. I know. But I was already guilty about everything. She said she regretted not spending more time with Dad. She regretted what she did with Gavin. Then Dad's letter confirmed he had noticed the distance between us. Instead of dealing with that guilt, she got angry at me. You were easier to blame, she said. I understood the explanation. That didn't erase what happened. But it was the first time she had explained herself without asking me to absolve her. Then she said, I understand why he chose you. I didn't know how to answer that. She smiled slightly. You keep every receipt. I laughed. That's your reason? You keep receipts for things normal people forget they bought. That's called being organized. That's called becoming Dad. We both laughed. Then Tara got quiet. I'm sorry. I had heard her say those words before. But every earlier apology had something attached to it. She had been confused. My marriage looked bad. Gavin felt lonely. It wasn't planned. She didn't understand why she did it. This time, there was nothing after the apology. No excuse. No request. Just, I'm sorry. I looked at her. I believe you. Her eyes filled with tears. Do you forgive me? That was harder. I could have given her the answer she wanted. Instead, I told the truth. I don't know. She nodded. That's fair. We sat quietly. Then Tara said, Dad was probably right about the 5 years. I raised an eyebrow. I'm going to need you to repeat that. She smiled. Don't push it. I want it recorded. I still hated the trust. I know. And I still think you enjoyed being the one with control. I looked at her. This time, there was no accusation in her voice. She wanted honesty. So I gave it to her. Sometimes. She nodded slowly. I knew it. That doesn't mean I made bad decisions just to hurt you. I know. I checked everything. Keeping the duplex made sense. I know that too. Then she said, but you liked being able to say no. I looked down at my hands. Yes. There was no point pretending otherwise. I hadn't stolen from Tara. I hadn't manipulated Dad. I hadn't taken more than my share. I had managed the property carefully, and both of us were financially better off because of it. But when Tara had desperately wanted me to agree to a sale, there had been a part of me that enjoyed refusing. For months, almost everything important in my life had been outside my control. I couldn't make Dad healthy. I couldn't make Gavin loyal. I couldn't undo Tara's betrayal. Then Dad left behind one decision where my agreement mattered. I handled that responsibility properly. But I'm human enough to admit the power felt good sometimes. The 5-year trust period still isn't finished. When it ends, we'll have another decision to make. Sell. Keep our interests. Arrange a buyout. Whatever makes sense then. Strangely, Tara no longer seems desperate to cash out. The rental income has helped her. Her debt is much lower. The duplex is doing well. Recently, she even said she might want to keep her share when the trust ends. I told her we would figure it out when the time came. Our relationship is better too. Not repaired. Not what it was. Better. She isn't the first person I call anymore. There are things I still don't tell her. Maybe that changes eventually. Maybe it doesn't. Gavin is completely gone from my life. Tara and I almost never mention him. Most of our conversations are ordinary now. The duplex. Her kids. Family. Dad. Those are the easiest ones. We can laugh about how he thought every contractor was trying to overcharge him. How he kept old screws in jars because throwing away anything potentially useful offended him. How a simple repair could consume an entire Saturday because Dad refused to admit he had bought the wrong part. And sometimes I think about his letter. He never knew exactly what happened between us. He only knew his daughters were hurting and angry enough that something permanent might get destroyed in the aftermath. So he put time between us and a permanent decision. He couldn't force Tara and me to forgive each other. He couldn't guarantee we would stay sisters in any meaningful sense. But he could stop either of us from making one irreversible choice while everything was still raw. Maybe that was all he was trying to do. The duplex is still standing. It earns more now than it did when Dad died. Tara received every dollar she was entitled to. And somehow, after everything, we can sit at the same table again. I think Dad would be happy about that. The part I'm less certain about is me. Because keeping the duplex was the responsible decision. But responsibility wasn't the only thing I felt. When Tara needed my agreement and I refused, there were moments when saying no felt like the first consequence of her betrayal that I didn't have to absorb myself. I'm not proud of that. I'm also not going to lie about it. So was I wrong for refusing to sell when my sister needed the money, knowing keeping Dad's property made financial sense, but also knowing that part of me enjoyed finally being the one who got to say no?